Assalamualaikum and a very good day. My name is Amir Fidos Nabi bin Azmi, metric number 2758223. The topic of my study will be a study on Malayan banking Maybank in Malaysia, performance and its determinants. As per Chapter 1, the major issue that faced by Maybank is technical issues or technology difficulties, as their website, mobile application and others often to experience service interruptions and slowness despite being recognized as the round 1 winner of Global Finance 2020 World's Best Consumer Digital Banks Award. For this study, we developed 3 research objectives and 3 research questions. The research objectives are first to identify the internal or firm-specific variables that can affect the performance of Malayan banking Maybank Berhad. Second, to identify the external or macroeconomic factors that could have an influence on Malayan banking Maybank Berhad's performance. And third, to examine potential external and internal influences on Malayan banking Maybank Berhad's performance. On the other hand, the research questions are first, is there a connection between internal variables and the performance of Malayan banking Maybank Berhad? Second, is there a connection between the external and the performance of Malayan banking Maybank Berhad? And third, is there a connection among internal and external variables on the performance of Malayan banking Maybank Berhad? Moving on to Chapter 2, based on the past studies, we developed our dependent variables and independent variables. Based on the previous study, the dependent variable is bank performance, and most scholars use return on asset ROA to measure bank's performance. Hence, we did the same for this study. Then, corporate governance. Many scholars found that corporate governance practices in a bank would positively impact the bank's performance. For this study, we measure the corporate governance through CG index. Next, there are 3 internal variables, namely liquidity risk, credit risk, and operational risk. Based on the previous study, most scholars use loan-to-deposit ratio to measure liquidity risk and found liquidity risk negatively affecting bank's performance. Meanwhile, most scholars use non-performing loan ratio to measure credit risk, and the result shows that the higher the credit risk, the lower the performance. As for operational risk, the measuring methods are different from each other, and the finding is both favorable and unfavorable. However, for this study, we use current ratio, average collection period, and operating margin to measure liquidity risk, credit risk, and operational risk respectively. Lastly, external variables which include inflation rate, interest rate, and exchange rate. Based on the previous study, the measuring method they used to indicate those rates were inflation rate, lending rate, and nominal exchange rate. For this study, we use the same methods except we use overnight policy rate to measure interest rate. The study shows that all the 3 variables negatively affect performance. Now, for Chapter 3, the sample for this study will be Malayan banking Maybank Berhad, and the number of observations will be 5 as the data was retrieved for 5 years from 2018 to 2022. For this study, one dependent variable, which is performance, and 3 independent variables were selected. They are internal, external, as well as internal and external variables. The relationship between one or more independent variables and a dependent variable are evaluated using ordinary least squares (OLS) method, and the application used to assess the data is IBM SPSS Statistics version 26. Now, moving on to Chapter 4, based on descriptive analysis, the statistics reveal that the mean return on assets ROA is 0.0143 or 1.4%, indicating that on average, the bank only managed to generate 1 cent on each 1 ringgit of assets invested, while the standard deviation is 0.0015, indicating that the data is centered on the mean and dependable. The mean current ratio in liquidity risk category for internal factors is 1.2066, meaning it can liquidate enough short-term assets to cover all short-term obligations for 5 years. The standard deviation is 0.359, indicating that the data is centered on the mean and less volatile. After that, under credit risk, the mean on average collection period is 10,496.24, indicating that Maybank took 10,496 days of around 28 years to recover payment due from its customers. The standard deviation is 546.1451, indicating that the data is more volatile and dispersed from the mean. Furthermore, under operational risk, the operating margin is 1.0719, which implies that the bank's management efficiency is 1.0107%. The standard deviation is 0.1680, which defines that the data of 5 years operating margin used for this statistic is clustered around the mean, which is less volatile and more reliable. As for external factors, under inflation, it shows that the mean on average inflation rate for 5 years is 0.0171. This indicates that in the average, the inflation rate 5 respective years in Malaysia is 1.71%. The standard deviation shows 0.0117, indicating that the data is clustered around the mean and less volatile. Next, under interest rate, the statistic shows that the mean for overnight policy rate is 0.0250. This shows that during the respective 5 years, the interest rate on banks in Malaysia was 2.5% in average. The standard deviation for overnight policy rate is 0.0071, indicating that the data is less volatile and the data is more likely to be clustered around the mean. Then, the mean for exchange rate, which is the external factor of this study, is 4.1666, which implies that the exchange rate of Malaysia against another currency, $1 is 4 ringgit and 17 cents in average of those 5 years. The standard deviation shows 0.1506, which is considered less volatile and the data is clustered around the mean. Lastly, under corporate governance, the mean of the CG index is 0.767. This implies that the Maybank'S non-official output is about 77%, which is considered good. The standard deviation, on the other hand, shows 0.1683, which indicates that the data is clustered and less volatile. As for the correlation, it seems that in this study, none of the independent variables has significant relationship with the dependent variable. On the side note, it seems that there is a significant positive relationship between CG index and inflation rate as the p-value below than 0.01. As for model summary, the internal model has R-square of 0.622, meaning that the three internal variables explain about 62.2% of the variation in ROA, while the adjusted R-square shows negative, which indicates that the model has no predictive value and poor fit. However, since R-square value is more than 0.5, then the model summary is acceptable. As for external model, the R-square is 0.847, meaning the external variables explain about 84.7% of the variation in ROA, while adjusted R-square is 0.387, which not very near 0.847 and is therefore not very good. But since the R-square is more than 0.5, then the model summary is acceptable. As for internal and external model, the R-square is 1, indicating that the internal and external variables explain 100% of the variation in ROA, while the adjusted R-square is unobtainable. But since the R-square is more than 0.5, then the model summary is acceptable. Next, coefficients. The result shows that none of the independent variables, internal, external, and external, has significant relationship with the dependent variable because all the p-values are more than 0.01. As for conclusion, we found that none of the independent variables has significant relationship with the bank's performance (ROA). The result might be because the relationship among the two variables might be correlative one or nonlinear relationship. Furthermore, the sample size of this study is relatively small, hence difficult to get significance. As for recommendation, even if the result shows not significant, if we were to look at the trend analysis, we could see that the flow of ROA and average collection period is moving in the opposite direction, indicating that when credit rates increase, the bank's performance will decrease. So, credit risk might actually has relationship with bank's performance, albeit indirectly. Thus, Maybank could invest more technology to digitalize their risk management to provide solutions and systems to reduce the probability and impact of the risk or increase the opportunities and benefits. It could also help the performance of risk management committee as the technology enable automation and streamlining of risk management processes. Furthermore, if we look into the trend analysis, we could see that the flow of CG index is the same with the ROA starting from 2020 to 2022. This could also mean that corporate governance may actually influence banks' performance. So, what Maybank could do to increase their performance is by increasing their by increasing their CG index. They can do so by increasing the number of corporate governance practices that have not been done, which is based on the corporate governance report. That's all. Thank you.